Coming up on today's show, the Falcons tried to add another quarterback, which led to a lot of memes popping up on the internet. And then we're going to discuss an ESPN report that had Michael Penix starting maybe a little bit earlier than we expected. We'll break it all down on today's episode. But Adam Schefter this morning tweeted out the Atlanta Falcons, who signed quarterback Kirk Cousins during free agency and then selected quarterback Michael Penix during the draft, put in a waiver claim this week for former Patriots and Jaguars QB Nathan Rourke, who was awarded to the New York Giants per source. So that right there got the internet kind of worked up, going, oh my gosh, Falcons are trying to add another quarterback. Now, I will add that if they missed it, which they did on Nathan Rourke, they may not be too upset because fast forward 2 hours later and Jeremy Fowler tweets out the Broncos have released quarterback Ben DiNucci. So don't be surprised if Ben DiNucci is the guy we are talking about on tomorrow's episode. But some background on Nathan Rourke. If you don't know who that is, that's perfectly fine. He was the Jags' third-string quarterback this year. He did make one hell of a game or a play in the preseason game for Jacksonville against the Cowboys. If you're like, why do I recognize that name? He was the guy that went through 4 different tackles and then threw a touchdown pass for Jacksonville. But even if they did add Nathan Rourke or they add Ben DiNucci or another quarterback, I think it is just quarterback competition for Taylor Heinicke. I don't think you need to look at this and try and make a headline out of it or try and make a big deal out of this story. No, it is just the Falcons going, we've got a quarterback coming off an Achilles injury. We've got a rookie quarterback as our top 2 guys. Not the worst idea in the world to have a little bit of extra veteran presence and, familiarity with the NFL. If those 2 guys are, 1, injured to open up training camp and OTAs and minicamp and whatnot, and 2, a rookie who's learning the ropes, maybe just to help move the drills along and have an extra arm in training camp. If Cousins is not ready to roll for OTAs and Penix is just learning the playbook, let's get a guy who's been through training camp, OTAs, minicamp, all that stuff before. Heinicke, though, he is definitely on the hot seat right now. I mean, we're going to talk about how ESPN labeled Kirk Cousins as a, quote, loser following the NFL draft. Taylor Heinicke, I think, is the biggest loser. I mean, he actually went down on the depth chart, right? Kirk Cousins is still QB1, but Taylor Heinicke will be battling with John Paddock, the University of Illinois UDFA signing, for that QB3 spot, which we'll see if Atlanta takes 3 quarterbacks to their 53-man roster, or is this a battle for the practice squad quarterback position? But speaking of Michael Penix, I'm not going to try and hide my initial reaction to the Penix pick, but I will add that, I can't wait for preseason Penix. I think we're going to see Michael Penix just air the shit out of the football and bomb it down the field. And it's going to create for some awesome preseason highlights. I've never doubted Michael Penix as a passer. Always thought he was one of the best quarterbacks in this draft class. Very excited to see him in the preseason. And slightly concerned that we may have some awkward conversations come August, which it's not a bad conversation to have if you have 2 good quarterbacks. But what happens if Kirk Cousins is listen, I'm not going to play in the preseason games, still coming back from the Achilles injury? That wouldn't be mind-blowing to me. And Michael Penix goes out there, balls out, throws 2 or 3 touchdown passes, and we're all sort of sitting there going, there's an elephant in the room here. The guy that they drafted 8th overall is looking really good, and they just paid Kirk Cousins all this money. Wonder if that leads to an awkward, encounter or 2 in the locker room with Cousins and his teammates. But before we get to the rest of today's show, we are 11 subs away from reaching 21,500. So join the single largest Atlanta Falcons YouTube community out there today. Now, some other news before we talk about Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins in more detail. We have an NFL schedule update. The NFL announced, or Adam Schefter announced, I should say, that the NFL teams were informed today that the regular season schedule is expected to be released next Wednesday, May 15th. So come hang out with us next Wednesday afternoon as we break down the entire Falcons schedule. We know the opponents. If you're unfamiliar with the NFL schedule process, you play your division opponents home and away. And then the other divisions in the NFL, you rotate. So one year you'll play the NFC West and the AFC West. And then it kind of goes clockwise fashion. And then to fill out the remaining games on your schedule, you'll also play whoever finished in your spot in the standings in another division. So the Falcons finished, third in the NFC South. So they're going to play the third place team in the other NFC divisions that they are not already scheduled to play. So with that being said, the last time the Falcons were on Sunday Night Football, as we await the schedule announcement, 2019. That's tough. That's, encroaching on poverty franchise level. Monday Night Football, Packers, Week 4, 2020. Thursday Night Football was that rain disaster with Mariota and the Panthers, Week 10, 2022. So hopefully all three of these may come to an end, and we'll see the Falcons play some primetime games in 2024. But I'll put the over-under at 1.5. 1.5 primetime games for Atlanta in 2024. What do you guys think? More or less, over or under? Now, next up on the show, could Michael Penix take over from Kirk Cousins as soon as 2025? Just sit 1 year on the bench? We'll unpack what ESPN's Bill Barnwell said about this, and I'll give you my thoughts and analysis along the way. But first, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and yes, of course, Georgia. Testing my skills on Prize Picks this season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $1,000 with just a few taps. So I love playing with Prize Picks because it's just a great way to stay engaged on some playoff games that maybe your team is not in. So as you watch the NHL and the NBA playoffs and you're like, it's fun, it's great by itself, but if you want to have some additional fun attached to it and make some money in the process, get started with Prize Picks today. Download the Prize Picks app and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. I put all that information in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks has so many great things. For example, like on Tuesday, they do Taco Tuesday. Prize Picks discounts select players' projections up to 25% to provide even more value. Download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. Now let's talk about Penix and Kirk Cousins because ESPN labeled Kirk Cousins as a draft loser. And there's some truth to this, right? I don't think the draft went maybe as Kirk Cousins would have hoped. So there's definitely some merit to him being a potential loser coming out of the draft. Same goes for other guys like Brandon Ayuk. He's looking for a contract extension. 49ers drafted a player, Ricky Pearsall from Florida, at his same position. Definitely gives the folks over in the Bay Area some more flexibility. If you're curious, here were the 10 winners. 10 winners they identified coming out of the draft. Like Daniel Jones, huge winner. He's like the Browns quarterback in draft day, who they all thought would take Bo Callahan, and instead they're going to go with Brian Drew. I wonder how that worked out for the Browns in that movie. But let's read a little bit about what Bill Barnwell wrote. If Cousins plays well in 2024, and both he and the Falcons want to split, there will be a market for him next year. Next time around, Cousins might just want to try to get his new organization to promise it won't draft a quarterback immediately after acquiring him. Now, I learned my lesson about saying things are a done deal, and I'm not going to do that for this one, but let's pump the brakes on already talking about Kirk Cousins and the Falcons splitting up after 2024. I think Atlanta had the best intentions when they signed Kirk Cousins to see him live out at least 3 years of his 4-year contract, because that's basically what it is. It's a 3-year, $100 million contract. Little pro tip for everyone. Anytime you see a contract in the NFL, subtract 1 year from it and then take that year and apply it to the guaranteed money, and that's how the team views the contract. Sure, $180 million is what's going to lead the newspapers, but in my eyes, it has always been a 3-year, $100 million contract. And if Kirk Cousins continues to ball out, then it's great for Atlanta. They'll keep him on for that 4th year. But they could move on after 3 years with very little financial burden. Now, he does have a $10 million roster bonus for 2026 if he is on the 2025 roster. $10 million by that time, like we always see the salary cap go up and up and up, is not going to be make or break money, I'd hope, for Arthur Blank. He does also have a no trade clause included, so the Falcons can't just trade him away if they are dying to start Michael Penix and move on from Kirk Cousins. No, Kirk Cousins is here until he is either released or he asked to be traded. And my guess is he's not going to be rushing to be asked to get traded because he picked the Atlanta Falcons because he wanted to retire as a Falcon. Now, Barnwell also wrote this. Could the Falcons move on after 1 year? Yes, although it would be more complicated. If Cousins agrees to a trade, it would be easy. Atlanta would actually save $2.5 million as part of that deal. And while it would have paid him $62.5 million for 1 year of work, it wouldn't be on the hook for the remaining $37.5 million in guarantees. The Falcons would have $37.5 million in dead money on their cap, but we've seen teams grow more comfortable with eating that sort of dead money if they are ready to move on from a quarterback. I'm not going to say it's an absolute fact like I do for other people, but Kirk Cousins is here for a minimum of 2 years. Like, I think Atlanta wants Kirk Cousins to be here for 2 years, right? They signed him to this huge contract not because they are already looking to move on from him, but because they think Kirk Cousins can continue to play at a high level for more than just one season. So I know Barnwell is kind of already getting ahead of himself a little bit, going, they drafted Michael Penix. Let's talk about the quickest way Atlanta can move on from Kirk Cousins. No, I'm here to say, pump the brakes. I think Kirk Cousins is the starting quarterback for 2024 and 2025. Spoiler, probably also 2026. But we'll slow down on jumping all the way to 2026 for now. Now, if you are in that camp of, well, I think he's gone after 2 seasons, and then it's Michael Penix in 2026, here are the raw numbers for the contractual obligations Atlanta has if they were to release Kirk Cousins before June 1, 2026. They would take on a $35 million dead cap hit, in the neighborhood-ish of what they took on for Matt Ryan when they traded him to the Colts for reference. A little south, though. 2026 cap savings, though, $22.5 million. If they were to trade Kirk Cousins, that would be more advantageous, right? The dead cap hit goes down by $10 million, and the cap saving goes up by $10 million. That's the roster bonus, I believe. But regardless, you would need to find someone to trade with, and Kirk Cousins has to sign off on the trade because he has a no-trade clause. I think the Michael Penix draft pick was a pick for 2027. Maybe 2026 if Kirk Cousins looks god-awful, and like Russell Wilson in Denver, the Broncos moved on after 2 seasons. The Falcons could do it, and it wouldn't be nearly as pricey as it was for Denver. Like, the Broncos picked up an $85 million dead cap hit when they released Russell Wilson. For Kirk Cousins, if they were just to outright cut him, $35 million is not even half of what Denver has on their books. But still, my gut tells me this was a pick for 2027, and then the hope and dream is 2027 turns into great quarterback play from then to 2037 and beyond, hopefully. Barnwell also wrote this on where Kirk Cousins could go. After mentioning the 49ers because of Shanahan, he says, otherwise, the other potential landing spots appear to be with the Raiders, Steelers, and Titans, none of whom have settled a quarterback of the future. The Giants, Jets, Saints, and Seahawks, and even the Dolphins could also be in the market for a veteran starter. I'm not going to speculate on what Kirk Cousins' next team is. I hope his next team is the Atlanta Falcons, and that's the last team. And it's him hoisting a Lombardi trophy in Atlanta, right? And then he decides to retire. Michael Penix takes over, and he plays lights out. Like, that is the ultimate goal and dream for the Falcons. And then everyone will look back at this draft and laugh at me for doubting them taking Michael Penix. But as far as, like, where could Kirk Cousins go after 2024? No, I don't think we should have that conversation. That is way too premature right now. Let's focus on 2024, and I'll toss in 2025 and probably 2026 as Kirk Cousins having at least 2 years, possibly even 3, with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, what year do you guys think Michael Penix will take over as the starter? Not going to include 2024. I don't think he's going to win the job in training camp. So 2025, 1 year of Kirk, 6, 2 years, 7, 3 years, or could it be beyond that? 2028? Like Terry Fontenot had to walk a tight line when he was talking to the media about when they expect Michael Penix to be the starter. He's like, could be 4 or 5 years. He probably wanted to say 3 years, but he knew that would be even more awkward with Kirk Cousins because he just signed Kirk to a 4-year contract, and he's basically saying, we don't see you serving all 4 years of that contract. So Fontenot will say 4 to 5, but I think maybe 3 years of Kirk Cousins is a much more realistic timeline. But that will do it for us on today's show. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, give us a like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and I'll see all of your beautiful faces tomorrow.